Social Psychology and Politics. Written by Dr. Liberty, read by Dr. Liberty. Social psychology is influential in many aspects of life, from religion to medicine. A great example of the application of social psychology is politics. Why politics? Politics involves swaying people to support their group. To win people over, politicians and leaders of political parties will employ a range of ideas from social psychology. I chose to focus on politics because politics has become more common after the latest election, especially with the news outlets. The goal of politics is to take power in a country through persuasion. In countries such as the United States, this is employed through voting for candidates from a party of your choosing. In the United States, there is a duopoly among the parties, Republicans and Democrats. The other smaller parties, such as the Libertarian Party and the Green Party, compete for seats, but will often lose or join the two main parties. The game of politics involves swaying people to vote for your party while convincing you that the opposition is the worst option you can make in your life. Politicians will typically use persuasion to try to get your vote. Persuasion, defined by Myers and Twenge, is the process by which a message induces change in beliefs, attitudes, or behaviors. There are two methods of persuasion: the central route and the peripheral route. The central route is the method that focuses on using arguments to try to generate a favorable response from the target audience. This method involves many steps. Step 1 involves getting the audience to pay attention. Step 2 is being able to comprehend the message. Step 3 is getting the audience to believe it. Step 4 is to try to ensure the audience will remember it. And Step 5 is trying to sway behavior. This method is direct and is commonly used on people that rely on arguments. The peripheral route involves using incidental cues to trigger an unconscious and automatic acceptance. A common method is using jingles or slogans. This is primarily used on people that do not have time to pay attention. Persuasion was clearly demonstrated in the 2016 presidential election by both major parties. Both used these methods of persuasion in tandem. The example by the Republican Party was the email scandal perpetuated by Hillary Clinton. President Trump first used the direct arguments as to why she would be unfit, followed by jingles like "Lock her up" and "Crooked Hillary." The Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton would use direct arguments as to why President Trump should not be the president, and use jingles to attack the Republican voters, namely "Love Trump's hate" and "Basket of deplorables." Central processing was used to convince people via arguments to vote for their party, while peripheral processing was used to get people to remember certain jingles when it came time to vote. It also was a way to help cement their arguments. These methods were not always successful. An example is the "Love Trump's hate" jingle. Many see this expression as irony, because many people that said this were acting incredibly hateful to the opposition. This will cause people to dig in and defend themselves. Historically, young people generally tend to be apolitical. Others tend to be very active, and others will even become radicalized. A review conducted by Crescijo and Barrett found many factors will influence one's political identity. One particular interesting finding was the influence of the political climate. It was found that in times of distrust and cynicism, young people feel the need to be a force of change. This was apparent in the aftermath of the 2016 elections and the immigration issue in Europe. Around this time, groups like alt-right, Antifa, alt-left, traditionalism, and identitarianism entered our vocabulary. In the case of the elections, people felt compelled to either fight or defend their ideas. This was clearly demonstrated at the Charlottesville rallies, where members of Antifa assaulted conservatives and members of the alt-right. Later that day, a member of the alt-right murdered a person from Antifa. This was also demonstrated in a torchlit rally that evening, orchestrated by members of the alt-right. The use of prejudice and conformity and groupthink were prominent influences in the example above. Prejudice is a preconceived negative judgment about a group and its members. Conformity is changing one's views in order to fit in with the group. Groupthink is the idea that an individual's thoughts are cohesive to the group's ideas, where realistic alternatives are seen as going against the group. These are used in politics to gain support and promote division. In politics, there is a factor called politicized collective identity. This is when the focus of a group is solely to gain political power. This is done through politicizing the environment to fit the social environment. Grievances will then be shared, and then a political scapegoat is blamed. From there, the group will either seize power or will continue to struggle. This can be used to sway third-party and independent voters to form a type of alliance. Once an identity is formed, an action phase will commence. This action can be protest or push people to vote for your party. In a study conducted by Clandermans, it was observed in the form of mobilization of protests through interviewing protesters. It was found that the more dedicated protesters decided to mobilize earlier than those who were not as dedicated. Clanderman's study concluded that group identification leads to active participation through persuasion, timing, and the decision on whether to participate or not. In the recent midterm elections, people were persuaded to vote through speeches, mostly from their party. Another influential factor was the timing of the midterm elections. The elections occurred on the heels of the presidential elections. To the Republican Party, this was seen as the opportunity to cement their power. To the Democratic Party, this was seen as the time to implement their policies and finally take control of Congress. A combination of persuasive speeches and the fallout of the presidential elections formed a perfect storm to seize power. This led to people taking action in the form of voting. My own observations of this were from going to the voting booth and talking to friends that ran the polls. My one friend remarked that there was a higher turnout for the midterm elections in this area. A final way one's vote is guaranteed is through radicalization. Radicalization is when a person becomes more extreme in their views. It was noted in Clanderman's study that an individual does not radicalize on their own. They radicalize through group influence. Political radicalization starts through a perceived failure of the state among disgruntled and marginalized groups. From there, the activist elements of the group will interact with others and become more radical. Attacks from the opposition will further push them as they will feel psychologically threatened. The group will then form prejudiced opinions on the opposition, the outgroup, and form more favorable opinions on their group, the in-group. Polarization will influence this as the opposition will become more radical in the process. This can occur through direct confrontation, like street fights and demonstrations, or through an indirect confrontation, like arguments on different social media platforms. In Europe, this became more prominent with the immigration crisis and the economic collapse. Many Europeans felt threatened by the influx of immigrants from the Middle East on the heels of the market crash. These people felt marginalized and abandoned by their own government. These disgruntled individuals joined radical groups, such as Golden Dawn, a far-right group in Greece, and Alternative for Germany, a far-right political party in Germany. Once these groups began to take action, the immigrants and the far-left movements like Antifa retaliated and were radicalized in the process. Direct confrontations did occur, but a significant amount of retaliation occurred through the use of social media. This is particularly interesting as social media is relatively young. My personal observations through online interactions show that many of these radicals are teens or young adults, mostly between the ages of 14 to around 22, that felt marginalized. Most radicalized in the span of a few months to a year, from what I suspect is interacting with like-minded people through social media. If radicalization occurred quickly during this cycle of elections, what of future elections where many of these individuals will be eligible to vote? I try to focus on current events within the past 5 years because the effects can still be felt and in a way is like history repeating itself. The economy crashed in 2008 and the immigration crisis started roughly around 2013. This presidential election occurred a mere 3 years ago, going on 4, and the midterm elections were a few months ago. Political radicals and polarization occurred in the last 5 years. This is reflective of Europe in the 1930s and 1940s. Your average person who would originally never think of supporting or joining these groups became a supporter or a proud member. This certainly was not the first time this happened, nor will it be the last. Social psychology is key to politics. Politicians and organizations will use these tactics to gain your support and your vote. These methods used include groupthink, prejudice, and persuasion. It is important that the daily consumer of politics be informed of what will be used to gain your vote so that you can pick wisely if you do vote. I am Dr. Liberty. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.